I got nowhere to call home.
There are a lot of other things that I could probably talk about with this article, but I think that, or with this argument, but I think those are probably my biggest ways that I would respond to it.
Okay, you have those written down, those different objections, correct?
Yes.
All right, if you can remind me of them as I go through each one, is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my own considerations of like the weaknesses of, say, like the Kalam Cosmological Argument is that it's an argument that really just goes to the intellect and it doesn't speak to the whole. But, I mean, that's not its intention, but otherwise I don't really see weaknesses to it, if that makes sense. As long as it's being done in its proper place, it's fine. But some people like to think of it as a sort of like, as soon as I tell you, therefore you must now believe in God kind of thing.
Oh my God, I'm a believer now!
Yeah. It's like a Damascus Road in a box, you know? So that would be a problem I see with the way a lot of people use it. As far as its strengths, I think it does perfectly what it needs to do. It shows, I would argue, that if the universe begins to exist, it has to have a cause. And unpacking that as the whole argument does, it's hard to come with different conclusions that we couldn't define as God. So, as for some of your objections, if you could go through each one at a time.
Yeah. Let me pull up my list again. Okay, my first one was with the first premise in the first part here, where whatever begins to exist has a cause. And I had talked about there being some limitations to that with what some physicists have observed with how some particles behave at the quantum level, where some particles act in certain ways without any perceivable cause.
Okay, so my problem with that is that when we're talking about the quantum level, we're no longer really talking about direct observation, and there's a lot of guesswork when it comes to quantum physics. Another problem is that we say that there is no perceivable cause. This is not the same as there is no cause. So we see, for instance, that we cannot detect what is it, like the speed and the location of subatomic particles at the quarks at the same time. We can either only detect the speed or the exact location, if something to that effect.
Oh, and there's another thing that's just mind-boggling, is that just the fact of shining a light on a particle and observing it changes its properties.
Yes, it does.
It's some insane stuff.
And that stuff is, I think, for one thing, it's a very, 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 very deep, very abstract.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's even helpful. I've seen a lot of people go so far as to say that quantum physics disproves the existence of God or something like.
Oh, I would not say that at all.
But like I've seen, and like I'm just like, guys, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, I've also heard people say that quantum physics proves the existence of God, and I don't see that either.
Yeah, it's just I think the problem with quantum physics is that it is so abstract, and it's a lot of.
Well, and there are so many popular misunderstandings and misapplications of it, like in the New Age movement, for example.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some of your rebuttals to what I said are valid. I would still say that, yes, I wouldn't quite say that it's necessarily a lot of guesswork, even though that's kind of like, I would say there's a lot of very well-respected physicists who interpret the data very differently. So I didn't bring this into the dialogue to say definitively I can prove that some things don't have a cause. Mm. I brought it in basically to say, well, maybe it's possible that we can't be as sure about it.
One of the things that Craig brings up with this exact argument, because he was actually surprised when people started questioning the first premise. If this is your understanding, then there's no reason to believe that things don't just pop into existence. Like why are there not zebras and Smithsonian institutions and Donald Trump's popping into existence out of nowhere, you know?
Oh, well, who knows? Maybe I popped into existence this morning and I only think that I have lived for 30 years.
Yeah, that's true.
What if it's like Dark City?
Yeah. Or maybe Maybe I'm the only one who exists, and you guys are all projections of my imagination.
See?
Yeah. But so getting into those types of things is just kind of silly, I would say.
It's fun, but you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, and you did say this earlier, so I think we're in agreement here. Sort of rejecting the first premise is kind of just problematic in and of itself.
I wouldn't say I would totally reject the first premise. I would just say there would be a few things from science that would give me some pause about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, to be honest, I would argue that if you reject the first premise, then there's no way to do science. If that makes sense.
Would you talk about what you mean by that?
Okay. So, with the idea that things just pop into existence, uncaused, you can't say that trees, the seeds, are the cause of all these connections in nature, like how a seed grows, how children are born, how physics works. All these things we could just put in. It just popped into existence.
Well, I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I think in a way you are exaggerating the implications of at least my reasons for having problems with the first premise. And what I'm trying to say is, yes, if we would say that there are so many things that happen randomly that don't have a cause, yes, of course, it would be very hard for us to try to explain any phenomena. But if there are some things, say, at the quantum level, let's just say some of these interpretations are accurate.
Okay.
And then at the quantum level, our scientific theories of causality in the natural world, not at the quantum level, break down. And we need different theories to explain it, and we're not completely there yet in being able to explain what we're noticing. Maybe this stuff that we think we don't have has a cause does. Or maybe it doesn't, but it's different at the quantum level. I don't think you can necessarily say we can't do any science based on that.
I think the problem there is that if we're willing to submit that anything can come into existence uncaused, then there's not a rule there anymore,
I don't think I was trying to suggest that anything can come into existence without a cause.
But I think, I'm thinking, not anything as in, I'm using the other type of anything. Anything in the sense of, like, if there's any possibility of something coming into existence without a cause.
Okay.
Then my whole point is then potentially everything can come into existence without a cause, because there's no more science for it. It's just sort of this, because you can't argue, well, in order for something to come into existence without a cause, there has to be this set of prerequisites. Well, then you're talking about a cause. You know what I'm saying? So let's put X as the uncaused thing that began to exist. If you're going to make a science about that, what we're saying is that, okay, well, we can expect things to come into existence without a cause when this set of prerequisites is met. Well, now you're just saying that there's a cause for it. Does that make sense now?
I'm working my way through some of that.
Okay.
I think I'm grasping what you're trying to say. Let me see if I got it. You have a problem seeing how we could really say anything meaningful about explaining the nature of things in the universe if it's possible that some things can pop into existence without a cause.
Yeah, if some things can happen randomly or without a cause, without a cause specifically, then you can't have a rule about, well, there are these things that can come into existence without cause, but these things, because then then you have to put, well, the reason is that this cause. Does that make sense now?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I still disagree, because if it could be established, and this is totally hypothetical here, if we could establish that these trees over here grew from a seed, and if we could establish, these trees over here just popped into existence out of nowhere, we would still be able to understand what caused these trees over here to come from the seed, while still accepting that these trees over here popped out of nothing. I don't think it would change our understanding of a lot of things, and it would really with our heads about some things not having a cause, but I don't think it would completely destroy our ability to understand those things that do have a cause.
But you could never actually demonstrate that, though. All you could then demonstrate is correlation, not causation.
So are you saying that it could be that those trees that I think came from a seed really just happened randomly out of nowhere, and the seed had nothing to do with causing it?
They just coincide, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting to think about.
So that's my problem with the first one. And you did agree that, like, tabling that kind of, it's just... I don't think you consider that to be the strongest objection.
No, not by any means. I like adding it to the dialogue, and here we go. We just had a fun discussion from it, but I am okay to accept the first premise on principle.
Okay, so what was your next objection? The second premise, I think, if you could elaborate.
Yes. In that, one major objection could be that the universe has always existed, that the universe itself is eternal. And then another objection could be that we don't completely understand everything that happened prior to the cosmic expansion of the Big Bang, if prior is even a good word for it. Did space
prior
and time. Right. Does space and time begin there, or is there a cosmic expansion followed by a cosmic contraction and it keeps going on? Was it birthed from a black hole from another universe in a complex multiverse and it continues on to infinity? Things like that. I think there are enough other possibilities to say the universe began to exist might not be very relevant to describe what actually happened, and we don't know enough to say that, is what my objection was.
Okay. Well, the primary view, scientifically, as far as cosmologists, physicists are concerned, is the Big Bang, and the Big Bang is the theory that the universe, including space-time, matter, energy, began to exist. And so, we'll get into the sort of oscillating universes in a second, but, so the Big Bang is not a big explosion that happened. I'm sorry, Kent Hovind. That's not what happened. It is...
I'm glad you understand that.
Yeah. It is the beginning of space-time. It is the beginning of matter-energy. And there is a lot of scientific evidence for it. I mean, if you look at, the cosmic radio wave, whatever.
Microwave
cosmic
background radiation.
That thing. Background radiation. That thing. I mean, there's still sort of leftover residual heat from the expansion. We see every single star sort of going further away from us.
Or the galaxies are redshifted.
Yeah, redshifted galaxies. Well, yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, we see every star and galaxy redshifting away from us. And the reason they're redshifting is the expansion, because it's still expanding, And so the idea is if you rewind that, then it goes to a point of being at a point, the universe being at sort of a dot. So it has this rapid expansion, and this is, once again, time, space, and matter-energy. And that is everything that is physical, okay? So the idea is that everything that begins to exist has a cause is a logical claim, not a scientific claim. Because science itself presupposes that. Scientists don't look at nature and say, okay, well, we're going to conclude that everything begins to exist has a cause. That's actually an assumption that we take into science, which is why philosophy is so important. So, looking at that, if we are looking at the very, very beginning of time-space, the very, very beginning of matter-energy, then we have to say that the cause of time-space, the cause of matter-energy, of all of it, has to be something that is not time-space. It has to be something that is not matter-energy. And there's something that you said prior, that you said, going on the other side of Planck time, which is the very, 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 very beginning of the universe. Yeah, it cannot be something that is physical, that has energy, that has... And you said, therefore, well, yeah, so there is no cause, like you sort of seem to imply at least, that there cannot be a cause, because there, like, nothing is not time and space and matter and energy. But that's the whole argument. The whole argument is that the cause has to be something that is not time, that is not in space, that is not made of energy, that is not made of matter. Some of what you were saying before seems to sort of kind of go along with that.
And can I interject something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, and this is why these conversations are so intriguing to me, because if we could follow that rabbit trail of thinking about a cause of the universe that doesn't share the same properties that we know as time and space or matter and energy, what would that be? Does it have to be a personal being with intentions and a mind? Could it be just something else that we have no way to even fathom? Well, that wouldn't fit into this sort of delineated projection of our own consciousness.
Well, that's always an option. But I think that I think that if we're going to try to give an answer, I think that's an option. I don't think that's an objection, if that makes sense. Because you have one person just saying, well, we don't know. And then you have one person saying, well, according to the best, that philosophy and science, well, really just at this point, philosophy can give us, this is an answer,
Well, yeah. And at the same time, I mean, I could hypothesize that it wasn't a personal being, it was a machine, or it was another universe with different properties that was beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, enormously powerful. Why does it have to be a personal, uncaused?
And yeah, so we'll get into that once we get to that part.
Right, I kind of jumped ahead. My bad.
No worries. So okay, with the next objection or part of that objection was the idea of an oscillating universe, more or less, where you have a big bang, big crunch every 20, 40 billion years, whatever.
Right.
40 billion years, I think. All right, here's the problem with that. So with the idea of an oscillating universe, where you have big bang, big crunch, where the universe then just collapses in on itself again and again, the thing is that you have to have a beginning of that point too. So this Kalam Cosmological Argument is not necessarily about this universe. You could have... This works within a multi-universe thing, which actually a lot of physicists are getting away from. The multi-universe idea is just kind of being poo-pooed. It is,
yeah.
Yeah.
I still love it, and I still...
I mean, great Doctor Who shows.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I've always known the multiverse is purely hypothetical with no evidence, but out of anything that I believe the strongest in without any evidence, it's a multiverse.
So my thing about a multiverse is it's just, even the term is kind of problematic, because universe is sort of like, that's everything that's physical. So well, there are more things that are everything that is physical.
I mean, I want to interject this real quick. I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he had a few other physicists on, and they were talking about the concept of a multiverse, and all of them were trashing it. They don't like the multiverse anymore, but a couple of them were talking about how to kind of solve some of the problems that we notice with the way you would expect space-time and matter-energy to be distributed in the universe. If it happened the way that we think it happened, space-time itself would be more warped and more bent, not as uniform as we see it. Therefore, they're working with another theory now that's not about a multiverse, but about a meta-universe. If you can think about it like a lake with a bunch of different small whirlpools in it that have different pocket universes in the meta-universe that in theory is not outside of the universe. We can still travel to them in theory, but that the whole rate of expansion of the meta-universe is happening so fast that even light itself couldn't catch up with the expansion to get into the other pocket universe. So
we can't see them ever.
Exactly. So...
All right. So
anyway, that was a fun thing I threw in there.
Folding space would have to be used for that, I'm sure.
Yes.
So the idea is that even with an oscillating universe, I mean, as long as the average Hubble expansion is greater than 0, and all possible universes that we have, even on paper, have to have a greater than 0 Hubble expansion, even ones that don't look like ours at all. But certainly every single theoretical construct that we have of the universe that would fit with what we observe has to have a beginning, because the idea is, think of it as a basketball that you're dribbling. If you drop a basketball, it's going to bounce once, bounce twice, keep bouncing, and it's going to keep getting lower and lower energy and higher entropy, and it's eventually just going to stop. So if we are talking about an infinite regress of oscillating universes where we have that big bang, where it's a big explosion, big crunch, well, we're talking about entropy there, and there's going to be greater entropy, and then we see entropy within the universe itself. With the idea of an oscillating universe, you can't have it infinitely regressing into the past. Well, for one, that just logically that's problematic in and of itself. You can't have an infinite moments of past time. But even just as far as like the way it works physically, it's going to run out of energy. It's going to be high entropy.
For the sake of some of our listeners, would you unpack a little bit what you mean when you say that you logically cannot have an infinite past?
Okay. You cannot have an infinite series of events going into the past. I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so
you brought it on yourself.
Okay, so an actual quantitative infinite is not possible. You cannot have an infinite number of coins. You cannot have an infinite number of anything. So the problem is that if we're talking about an infinite number of Big Bangs, then it doesn't work. The only way an infinite can, quote, exist is as a theoretical thing. So you can have something that is potentially infinite. So you can have a beam of light go and keep going and keep going and keep going and never stop. But the thing is that it is at any point in time a measurable distance. Numbers, you can have numbers keep going and keep going and keep going. But at any point in time, you can measure those numbers and say, okay, well, we have this amount of numbers that we have counted so far. You can have a potential infinite, so you can have a, quote, infinite as far as something that has not happened yet, but you cannot have something that goes infinitely into the past as far as a series of events or anything like that.
Well, okay, help me understand then, or some of us here, why that applies just to the future, not to the past. And if I'm going to use your example of a mathematical linear line, if you start at point 0 and you count 1, 2, 3, 4 forward in the positive linear progression, you can have an infinite. But if you go in the negative direction, -1, -2, -3, and so on, you're basically saying you can't go infinitely in the negative. And I'm not really...
You can. No, you can. So, yeah, there's a difference there. So, that's not because both of those are just going forward. They're just doing it through different ways. You're counting, quote, forward, but using negative numbers in the other example. A better example would be like, I'm counting backwards, trying to get to 0 from infinity. Can you do that? Does that even make sense?
So it's more of a problem with our way of understanding it, but not in theory.
No, like that's just not possible. You cannot count backwards from infinity.
Well, I mean, if you're at a point in time in the infinity...
You can count backwards, but not from infinity.
Okay, we might need to table this part and come back later, because this is both blowing my mind, and at the same time I'm not completely grasping what you're saying, so let's just do it later.
Okay. Alright, so what was your next objection?
That your mom is fat?
PH or F?
Both.
Oh, snap.
Because ad hominem beats your argument all the time.
Oh, yes. Dawkins taught me that.
So we need to, like for the picture, when we post this podcast, it needs to be that meme, Batman is riding an elephant, this renders your argument invalid.
Oh, yeah, if you can find it. Yeah.
I will. I'll send it to you.
All right.
Okay, so I think, let me see, make sure we got through all this. Okay, my next problem was with... Okay. There are two things about the creator or the god. The first one, that it is in a way circular in that you're relying on a hypothetical being to explain the universe's existence, which in turn proves the existence of that hypothetical being that you invoked in the first place.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that? Because I don't see that. Maybe I'm just not understanding it correctly.
Okay, because in the first one, you're basically trying to say the universe had to have a cause of some kind.
Yeah.
And then you're basically saying, well, my hypothesis is this personal creator, yada, 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 made it in the first place, or that...
Okay, I think I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Do you want to finish it, like what you were going to say, or sorry?
Yeah, you're good. Basically, here comes this hypothesized being, and I'm just asserting here in premise 2 that's the only way the universe could have come into being in the first place. Therefore, ba-bam, that being exists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a misrepresentation of it.
Okay.
Okay, you take them as two different parts of the same argument. So you don't get to the second section, which is like the definite elaboration on what that cause is, without sort of concluding the first one. All right. With the first set, that is the argument in and of itself. That premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, or conclusion. Premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. All things that begin to exist have a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. That is its own thing. All right. So then when you're shown that, you're like, okay, makes sense. Now, what is that cause is what is dealt with in the second one. All right. So when you're at the second part, we are already with the idea that, okay, this is perfectly valid sound. There has to be a cause of the universe. Now, what can that cause be? So that's where Craig gets into the unpacking, where he says, well, since the creation of the universe is the creation of time, and time has never been before, therefore the cause of time cannot itself be time.
Okay.
Or in time. You cannot be born in the house that you built. Likewise, space, that is the beginning of space. And likewise, that is the beginning of matter, that is the beginning of energy. So the cause has to be without matter, without energy, and the cause has to be outside of time and outside of space. Or using outside as a convenient.
Okay. Can I interject something real quick?
Okay.
I'm following what you're saying, that it would need to be outside of... Okay, well, hang on. You said you can't be born in a house that you built. Of course, logically, that's crazy.
Unless you have the DeLorean, but you know.
Yes, of course. Or or like it's a time loop. Yeah. But you can be born from another being who is the same type of being that you are. Basically, this one is okay. If I was going to compare this, I'd say, you remember some of those old myths that were like the Earth is on the back of a tortoise and that's on the back of an elephant and all that. Well, where does that stop? I think this argument is trying to give us a stop.
Okay.
That there has to be, that the mind, it's very difficult for our brains to comprehend an infinity. It's hard for our brains to comprehend or sometimes even be satisfied with something that doesn't have an explanation or doesn't have a end, a termination point. I mean, okay, I'm going to bring this into the dialogue here because I feel like it's pertinent. When I was a kid and I was contemplating on the idea that one day I was going, after I died or after Jesus came back, I would be in heaven for eternity. And I would lie awake at night thinking about how, geez, 1,000 years later, 1,000,000 years later, I was like, dude, this is like exhausting me. I mean, like, I was like, what would I do with myself? What does Amazing Grace say? The last line.
We've been there for 1,000 years.
Yes, we've no less days than when we first begun. Kind of a thing. I think the mind just like blows when you try to comprehend an infinity. So I think that this argument is trying to solve some of that problem, to say that, well, maybe the source of time, space, of matter, energy, of things that have beginnings, of things that are changing, of things that are material, was something that was not that. So, in theory, I'd be like, okay, let's toy around with that idea. However, I think part of, and maybe I'm distracting too much from what you were trying to reply to, but when you were talking, I was thinking about this. I can follow you on it being the not this. But that doesn't tell us anything about what that is.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You're defining it relative to what it's not.
Okay, so with that, I'm using that terminology, but you can just put it into positive. It is beyond space. It is beyond time. And, when we're talking about something that's abstract, we do have to sometimes use negative terminology of what it is.
Or even terminology that's relative to what we know.
Yeah. Well, and that's one problem. So, just to insert this, not that you're doing this, but sometimes a lot of atheists I talk to will be like, well, we just don't know. I'm like, well, okay, that's convenient. You are you gonna accept that from a six-day creationist? Well, we just don't know, so therefore six-day creationism. Like, you just don't do that.
Well, I'm not too sure what you're saying.
Okay, so like, I point to a six-day creationist and I say, hey, look, geologically, it's not 6,000 years, kind of thing,
Right.
And he goes, well, you just don't know. We don't know for sure. It could just be this great mystery that we don't know. It's actually worse than, well, God did it, kind of thing. At least the six-day creationist can just say, the magical person in the sky did it. Whereas where we're saying that, well, what we don't know is the answer. Like, not even like a name for it, just we don't know.
Okay. So help me understand this. Okay. Are you saying that in this argument, if we're dealing just with this argument alone, we're not trying to necessarily get into theism or even Christianity? Okay, and maybe for sake of pretensies here, let's take out the term personal. Okay. You're simply trying to say that the answer to what caused it is beyond what we know, and we don't know it, but it was something. Is that what you're trying to say, or am I not understanding you?
Okay, so for my part of the argument is, whatever that cause is, it cannot be physical. Because we are talking about the Big Bang, which is the beginning of all physics, of everything physical. All right. So we're starting with that. So that's what the second part of the whole Kalam cosmological argument is about. Does that answer your question sufficiently, or?
Kind of.
Okay.
So would you help unpack why the need for calling? Okay, yeah. Everything else here is in the negative. It's okay. Whatever it is, for sake of argument, let's throw out theism and Christian stuff here, and just say whatever caused it is in the negative relative to us. It's not this. It's something else. What is the justification for invoking
the personal part?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
yeah.
All right. The personal part is that the only entity we know of that, at least in theory, is able to sort of work independently is personality, is personhood. Okay? This obviously involves the idea of the concept of free will. So, when we are talking about the idea of the point of the Big Bang beginning, well, if we are talking about the cause of the Big Bang, if it's mechanical, then something has to have caused that mechanical thing to set the Big Bang on start. Mechanical in just like the sort of logical sense, not like machines, but like in the sense of like no will of its own, Then there's the problem of just, well, then you're just sort of, then there is an infinite regress if it's just this constant line of, because then it'd have to be, well, what caused that to cause the Big Bang? Well, then what caused that to cause the cause of the Big Bang? Then what, and keep going back. As long as it is a sort of mechanical thing that happened. Now, if you insert the idea that it was actually a personal being with a will, then the personal being's will to decide so is what caused it, and then you don't have to go beyond that.
Okay, well, would you help me understand this then? Why is it that... Okay, yeah, if we're going to go even with the way that the mechanics of this argument work, if I understand correctly, you were saying if the cause is outside of what we understand this universe to be, but it was something more mechanical, or something without an intentional mind, if you will, that somehow that would necessarily lead to an infinite regress, because somehow the mechanical thing would need a cause. Why is it that saying that it was an intentional mind not need a cause of its own necessarily?
Because because our understanding of what will is that a decision is being made, that there's not a necessary cause for someone for deciding. You can just decide to do something. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're basically arguing from the position that our impulses or desires or will to do something feel like they come from nowhere, or like we don't really know where they come from, and they're not caused. And that's your understanding of free will?
They're caused from ourselves.
We really need to do a separate episode on free will.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to rabbit trail so hardcore here. Okay, so you're basically saying this is based in that kind of a concept, and if you're looking at it in more of a, like I might, a more of a deterministic concept, that I might not quite see it that way.
Yeah, you might not quite see it that way, yeah.
Okay, I get you.
And then what was did you have another objection?
I think so. Let me look.
We might have to cut this into 3.
Jesus Christ, Kingy.
That's a good talk.
I think I was saying... I know, I'm loving this. I think I don't know, we may have gotten everything that I'd already said, unless you listen to it again and realize that I forgot something.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we got into everything pretty much.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was the Kalam Cosmological Argument. Very, very tough, yeah.
Yes.
This is probably cut into 2 episodes.
Yes. Part 1, part 2. Well, I mean, some people post really long podcasts.
Yeah,
so
I don't know how...
It's personal preference.
Yeah. I prefer, I think, the shorter one, so I might have this cut in half, maybe into 3. We'll see what happens.
Do what you want.
So, what are your thoughts on this whole talk?
I've loved this.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the one where we've, like, openly disagreed the most.
Oh, yeah, probably.
And I had a lot of fun with it.
Oh yeah, it was really great. Yeah, it was kind of good getting to talk about that, because I have not talked about the Kalam Cosmological Argument in a long time. And,
me neither.
The last time we talked about it, probably, well, at least a few years ago when we were last talking about it, it didn't go like this.
Not at all.
It was like, yeah, no, much more antagonistic. But no, this is a great talk.
Yeah. I like talks like this. I mean, that's why it's hard for me to still watch debates, especially between a philosopher and a scientist that doesn't have an appreciation for philosophy in the first place.
Yeah.
But even the structure of a debate is so limiting and doesn't allow for this type of, let's just intersect and work some of this stuff out and realize there's some unfinished business.
Oh yeah,
you know?
definitely. Yeah. So I think that's about all we have for today. And I'm actually heading to work after this, but then after that I'll edit all this, and then it should be out there in the next few days.
Bring me a steak burger.
Yeah, sure, whatever. By the time it gets sent to you, by the time it gets sent to you, it's gonna be no good. It's gonna be nasty. But anyway,
like your mom.
Oh snap!
Snap.
Anyway, this is the Religious Nut, Brother James.
Chrissy.
Is it Chrissy now?
Sometimes.
Sometimes Chrissy.
I am sometimes Chrissy.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna call you Kingy still. Is that all right?
Yes,
okay.
That's totally fine. I will answer to Kingy too.
But you are Christy/Kingy/Chris, and you are the...
Oh, I am so hellbound, you have no idea.
I have an idea, Kingy, I have an idea. Anyway, I hope you all have a good whatever time of day it is.
Yeah!
Peace!
Love and chicken grease.